Hello and welcome to another edition of the Business Buzz. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman. We have our co-host, Chris Calandra, on the Buzz joining us. And I think we have an interesting segue into the bigger show today. And what it is something that Chris mentioned because he delves in the financial field with his efforts. And one of the things he was talking about is many people that you deal with now, they can't pinpoint it, but they're nervous about the economy going forward. Can you articulate that to a greater degree?
Yeah, it's an odd thing, and it's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night because I speak with a wide variety of people, and it just seems that everybody feels something is gravely wrong in the United States, and they can't really put their finger on it. It's a little economics, a little job, a little housing, a little government, but it just seems like there's this pervasive mood that something's wrong. They just know something's wrong. They can't really exactly figure out what it is, but it kind of creates this mood, and it's amazing whether it's somebody that's under 30 or 40-year-olds, people that are employed, small business owners. Again, it seems to be fairly widespread.
Now, let me ask you about that because I think you're right. I know you're right. Could it be the fact that before 2008, besides the wars, and that's another completely different issue, the economy was smoking, and then it basically just crashed. So could it be that people are thinking, wait a second, things look good then and they collapse. They don't look so good now. Why should I be optimistic?
I think that might be part of it, but I don't know if it explains all of it, and it's a good time to point out that you have a few years on me. But I think historically
you always are good at that, Chris.
Yeah, we've had crashes before. We've had periods where the economy crashes or there's a recession, but at least based on what I've read and understood about history, even recent history, I don't think you got that same mood disorder, if you will.
Well said, Chris.
In
my
the past.
Son, Chris, that you were absolutely right because actually before 2008, okay, and when I was a kid, let's say in the mid-late 70s, you know, I didn't have to experience it, and it was all fun and games because I didn't have to live it, but you had recessions, so I can't comment that much on that. I can comment on 82 on, when I was actually interested in jobs and so on and so forth, that even 82, which is a huge recession, okay, people kind of forget, 83, 84, unless you shot someone, you're going to get a job. I'm talking more for young people.
Right.
You got a job. 91, which was kind of a joke recession, you know, liberal media destroyed it because it was George H.
But it was
Bush.
a very shallow recession.
But it was just his joke. You thought the world was falling apart. It wasn't. He was a great president, not like his son. Excellent president. And after that, a quarter after that recession, full employment. I mean, 2008, what? I mean, that's 5 years ago, and it's still never really.
But I think it ties into just and I know we're not fans of necessarily President Obama and his administration on the business buzz, but setting aside the policy part, I think he's confronted with a big problem I think he's done a terrible job of, aside from the policy part, is he's really not the cheerleader in chief.
It's so well said, because even like Clinton,
absolutely,
who had an ego, which is nothing wrong with that. You're a Rhodes Scholar, God bless you. He said in 95, whatever, this is the best economy in 40 years. You know, people like Rush Limbaugh poo-pooed it, whatever. But people think, well, maybe it is. Ronald Reagan, morning in America. George H., this is America. That's what he said. In other words, what are you talking about? Where it's over? No, it's not over. It's America. And you have kind of, I think you have a similarity between Obama and Carter.
Absolutely.
Very two smart people. Carter was much smarter than Reagan. Was he as effective? Absolutely not. They just get lost in the intellectualism and aren't sometimes it's not all that complicated. Be a cheerleader. Mr. Obama, President Obama, have a speech where you're saying things are really looking good.
Absolutely.
No, he's all doom and gloom, and he's all worried about minutia too. He was involved in Trayvon Martin. He was involved in this. Look at the big picture.
No.
That just these little things, relatively little things, don't affect the average person. Be the spokesperson, the bully pulpit of, hey, we're over, the worst is over, America's best days are happening. But I think the problem with him is he can't do that because there's a huge credibility problem. Because people, I'm sorry to say, do not take him all that seriously. Even though he's
No, I
much
understand.
smarter than Reagan. When Reagan said it's morning in America, people believed him. Obama, it might be like a thing for late night TV laughing.
Right.
There might be the butt of maybe several jokes. What do you think?
I think if you compared speeches from lots of different presidents, going back, let's say, to Carter, that Obama's of the more depressing, gloomy.
Carter said he had these he had this fireside chat. Again, I think I was still in high school, and it was like, "What's wrong with America?" You look it up, Google it. It was this big speech of, we're too greedy. It was all blame America and all the, and you got to do less with more. And when people hear less with more, they say, forget about the selfish reasons, the greed factors. Oh boy, things are really bad.
Absolutely. And you've been around the business world, and anybody that's done like self-help training or read a motivational book or how to make more money, make more sales, be a better, any of those things, it'll always advise you to start with a positive attitude and to portray that attitude, to put pictures up of what you're striving to obtain, or picture who you want to be like, or the type of relationship you'd want to have with your spouse or whatever. And it doesn't seem like he's ever gotten exposed to any of that. And sometimes that helps, regardless of the policy, even what you're trying to do. What's the old adage? What the mind can conceive, it can achieve. And I know those are all kind of quaint and trite, but they do have meaning and they do work in a certain extent. So when I talk about this kind of gloomy attitude that people have where they can't put their finger on it, I almost feel that the president feels the same way.
Well said. I think you're right. I think also, and I don't think government's going to solve any problem. Believe me, anything they touch, look at the education system, it just spirals into oblivion. But you have dysfunction on both sides. You have a Congress that's just completely dysfunctional. You have the presidency that's also dysfunctional. So people think there's no reason to have real confidence.
Perhaps everybody having this feeling that something is gravely wrong, and this is when I lose sleep at night, is perhaps they're not incorrect, that there is something or many things that are wrong, and there's this backdrop that is gloomy and maybe much darker than most people are optimistic by nature, but maybe there really is something that we should be afraid of, that something is wrong and that we can't put our finger on it, but eventually it'll manifest itself and it's not going to be good. That's what makes me really nervous.
I really believe you deal with a lot of people day in and day out. So do I. I really believe that people, it's almost like at below the surface. It's not. In 2009, in 2010, it was right there. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Now that's over. The panic is happening. It's like someone that's been assaulted. Oh my God, kind of reeling and they kind of get themselves together. It's in that phase. They're kind of leery, they're paranoid because it happened to you once. You're going to be scared to walk down that road again. I believe that it's below the surface, but I think people look at where the economy is and what reason is there for optimism.
I think that's a good point. I saw, and I'm a big fan of his. I don't agree with everything he says, but Peter Schiff, he's a financial guy.
Should have been the governor of Connecticut. He was awesome.
I think he ran for senator. I think.
Senator, and I think he was looking at the governorship.
And he was on Larry Kudlow's show, and it's one of my favorite shows. And basically, he said, the government keeps telling people there's a recession, but when you poll them, they say there's a recession. And the reason why people feel like there's a recession is they don't believe the government statistics, they believe their own eyes, and in most people's lives, they're seeing a recession.
Oh yeah, no. It's like inflation. I threw up the figure to our esteemed friend John Decker. Hopefully he's listening or watching.
Yeah.
And the unemployment rate, the inflation rate, they say is like 1%, 1.5, maybe 2. And I'm like, I think it's around 8. And he goes, you're absolutely right. Like the real, if you take out the dummy numbers.
Absolutely.
And I think people are so sick and so jaded with these the numbers. You can make anything into anything you want with statistics. Look at that old adage about statistics lie, whatever. There's no way inflation's 1.5%.
Sure.
You go to a grocery store 5 years ago and then go now, tell me it's 5%. It's all the other thing. Unemployment rate. Unemployment rate's not 7. If full employment rate is 4, you're saying it's 3 points away from full employment. I would tell you you're nuts.
Absolutely, and I think you're right.
Like
and that's an example. So the government says there's no inflation, but the person goes to the grocery store and they see lots of food inflation. They go fill up their car, they see lots of food inflation. When businesses look, they see the cost of regulation, which is an inflation, at least in terms of the cost of doing business, is going up. Taxes generally are going up. Usage fees. I know, like I have my insurance license, state of Connecticut insurance license. That fee went up. I have an LLC, a small business, and just to change like a little thing in the charter that's on file with the state, the fee went from $60 to $120. That's all inflation. So people are seeing inflation, but the government says there's no inflation statistics, yet I seem to be spending a lot of money, more money than I used to be.
Yes. Oh, no, absolutely. There's no question about it. So I think it's a whole thing of government mistrust, and that leads us into our next chapter, is that people don't believe the government. I believe that, let's just say, like when my father was, let's say, a little younger than me, people really believed the government. 1960, whatever they said, it was. And I think certain things happened, a calamity of errors, Vietnam, Watergate, the list goes on. People are like, it's a joke. And that begs the next question, Chris. When your government becomes a joke,
yes,
what's the future? I mean, I think, people have always been cynical. I think people are cynical on steroids. What do you think?
Oh, it has to have tremendous consequences, because when you look at, the leaders in this country, I think even Democrats and Republicans agree. I don't know many Democrats that look at, say, Harry Reid or Nancy Pelosi and say, oh my goodness, I mean, those are leaders. They're great people, deep thinkers. I identify with them. And I don't know many Republicans, including me, that look at Mitch McConnell or John Boehner and think that they're utterly impressive
I really
people.
believe that Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, McConnell, I don't know. But Boehner looks like just like almost a joke, like some country club suntan guy puffing on a butt, going onto the golf course, having a couple beers. Reid is a mental midget. I don't know how he got out of law school. It might have been an online class. No idea. And Nancy Pelosi, I'd say on this hierarchy of dumminess, first of all, she's an entitled person. She's a daughter of a multi-millionaire, highly privileged. Off script, I would say some junior high school kids are more articulate. Well, I don't think she has a clue about anything.
Now, this may come off as an elitist. Hopefully, it doesn't to the audience. But I would say, it's midweek that I've met more impressive people than the four we just mentioned, and I haven't even gotten through my work week.
Oh no, I think it actually goes down to a bigger point. I've said this on our radio show. I call it the Twilight Zone effect. I've coined it, and I think it's absolutely arrogant and accurate. I like that. There's a Freudian slip.
Little Freudian slip.
There you go. But if you saw a movie in 1980 when you were 13 years old or whatever, and you saw a movie and it was called America 2012, you would walk out and say, that's impossible.
Yeah, ridiculous Hollywood.
Exactly. The point is, our leaders who are not the best and the brightest, in other words, if you just did nothing, you would be in an exponentially better situation than you are now. Like Casey Stengel said in 1965 with the Mets, they lost like 140 games. It was a team effort. You got to try to screw things up as much as they do.
Sure.
Do you agree or not?
I do agree. And when you look at this gloominess that we're talking about, and I feel bad because people might be like, desperate and go up to the roof and jump or something. We're not advocating that. But when you talk about government being like an institution now we don't have faith in like we did in, say, the 60s or the 80s. But it's not just the federal government. You look at what's going on in Major League Baseball and sports now with all these banned substances. And
say,
the children, you get.
It's a huge point. It's not rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
You look at a guy like Henry Aaron, right? I'm sorry, he got it done the right way. Okay,
Sure.
He knows steroids. The guy worked out the way you should. He probably ran. He lifted weights. He had 750 home runs. And I think it's a travesty that you got Barry Bonds, and it's hysterical. It's almost a joke, and the arrogance to think he could pull it off. You look at him in 1990, he's like slender.
Yes.
And I'm sorry to say,